Guys, we're back. Rick and I have returned to the screen, and
Yep.
to those that listen to the podcast. Uh, we've we were so busy preparing for the CrossFit Games, and I know for you, moving family, in college, there was just so much going on, and even this week getting back, Rick, this has not been an easy week to get recording, but I'm stoked that we're making this happen. It's Friday afternoon, we're recording here,
We
and
need to.
we have to. There's so much to talk
There's a lot
about.
to talk. A lot to talk about. And I'll tell you what, you're real good about the social media posts. I still haven't even made one. I have so many people to thank, and I've thanked them personally. So I know that's what's important, but I have wonderful memories and pictures, and I just can't. I suck at social media. So,
It's not that easy, is it? It's hard. It's hard work.
do you have anybody that can help with that? Give me a name or two.
No, I don't have anybody that can help. But there's you just have to pull the trigger. I actually we had our photographer there. Micah Shoemaker was the Boulder Athlete photographer. So after the
great.
event, he was amazing. I was like, hey, get a picture of me in front of this, age group games, and he did that, and he actually sent me a handful of images, literally before he got on a plane that night, and I was able to create that first
Sure.
hey, we did it post.
Yeah.
And then I've been pretty dark since then. I've been so busy, but I did, Rick, this afternoon, finally get out my thank yous. I just had that rolling around in my head, and all the
Right,
people I want to
right.
thank. I had a whole list, and I think I covered it. But the thank you list is something like you could write post after post after post. I mean, Rick,
Yes.
I would have thanked
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Mention it on the
Ditto.
show. Thank you for
Get your
being the guy
programming.
that we brainstorm the stuff, we talk about it, we think about it, we talk every other day via video messaging on Marco Polo about all this stuff. And without good friends like what you and I have, we're
Very
just
difficult.
islands. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank
Well,
you, Rick.
I appreciate it, but there's one thing. Let's see. If I tell this story, you'll guess. Competitor, my age group, was throughout the weekend having some pretty creative and unique posts. Well done with some video editing, some music. Not a lot of verbiage, but just enough to let you know what was going on. And I went up to this competitor. I was like, man, I know how you are with technology. How are you doing all this right now? And he's like, it's not me. It's so-and-so. That so-and-so happens to be a girlfriend, I believe. So,
He's handy.
we can talk after. But I was like,
Yeah.
how is this guy doing all this stuff?
Yeah.
And it was fun. I'll tell you what. Let's talk offline. You got names? Help me out here,
Sounds
please.
good. Sounds
Absolutely.
This episode is brought to you by the Kinian Move Plus. Pain slows you down. The Move Plus helps you fight back. Using red light and near infrared technology, it targets inflammation, speeds recovery, and gets you moving again faster. No pills, no downtime, just real relief. Wherever life takes you, take the Move Plus. Your body will thank you. Save 10% with code Jason Grubb Fitness. One word. That's Jason Grubb Fitness.
Well, let's set the stage.
Yes.
Let's talk through the games this year. A lot of people were there that listened and had a firsthand experience. But for those that had a firsthand experience, we're going to review some of that stuff. And for those that weren't there, maybe you caught the live stream, which you can still go back and watch. It was great. But here were some thoughts that Rick and I had. From 2024 to 2025, one of the things that made this unique was it felt like they had hit their stride as far as programming and organizing this large of an event. They hit their stride this year. Last year felt like, it felt smooth last year. Like things seemed to flow, but I think behind the scenes, there was a little more chaos last year. It was a lot of work. This year, I know they worked like crazy. Yeah. I've talked with Joe afterwards. They did work. They worked harder this year than they've ever imagined that they worked. But I loved this Columbus Convention Center. Having everything in that one space was so good. You just even though we would go back to our Airbnbs or our hotel rooms, we would come down and just be there. We didn't have to like a separate area. Everything was just right there. So it felt very well executed from an event standpoint.
I had a thought though, and I would love to ask Bob and Joe about this. they had so much space. I'm afraid they almost had too much space on either end. There was a kids area down at one side, and the kids were just running because there was just wide open spaces. You almost feel like the way the convention center was blocked off with A, B, and C, you might have been able to get 4 competition floors, warm-up areas, vendor village in just B and C. You might not have needed A. I mean, or whatever the letter is on the end.
Yeah.
I mean, it was gigantic, and I think they could have even used more seating because in some of those men's and women's heats that everybody wanted to watch, it was 5 or 6 deep standing, preventing, not providing the best views. So you could have had even more seating.
Yeah, it was, we actually had a debrief yesterday. Since we're, as Boulder Athlete, we're working with the same team preparing for Legends. We had a debrief about the game, sort of playing like, what are problems that could be fixed and how are you moving forward and how can we make Legends even better, all of those things. But that was definitely one of the pieces of feedback. The stands were amazing. And as crazy as it is, they weren't enough. And they were a little bit too close to the athletes. It was almost like that walkway was 5 or 6 people deep. You couldn't walk through it.
Right.
And in fact, the first couple of rows of the seating were useless because
you couldn't see.
You couldn't see. You'd have to be standing, and then all the stands would have to be standing up. It was really funny. The one thing I do like about, the stands were great. Now, I think a lesson learned is I agree with you. The whole thing could have been consolidated a little bit and maybe even more stands. As crazy as that sounds.
Absolutely. Yeah.
More stands, especially if it's just going to be on the end cap. But when we had our first event so our first event was the run. So it's technically our second event, that evening event, we're doing max clean and jerk. I remember on my first clean and jerk, I did my clean, I stood up, and, in my gym, I always face a particular direction. And there happens to be mirrors in the gym that I train in. And so I'm often looking at myself, checking my form and all of those things. But so now I'm staring on my first clean directly at Bob. He's literally 5 rows up at the stands. And I stand up, I look directly at him. I'm like, oh, well, there's Bob. And my kids are right in front of me. My wife is right there. Everybody else is right there. But I jerk, and I was like, it's just funny what your brain is doing in the middle of a competition, where you're like, I am focused on everything, this clean, everything's just so focused, and I just happen to notice who's in the stands right there.
Well, or the fact that there's multiple faces. And I know a couple times I looked, I was getting from my support group, one specifically was yelling at me, pick out a spot and stare at it, because I think he saw me kind of looking around. I'm like, I'm not used to doing that with that many people around, or hardly call it anybody around. And with it being the distance so close, they were right on top of you, depending on where you were in the heat. I do want to say thank you, though, there were people that might be listening or were there, but it was medical staff. It was athlete control. It was the volunteers. It was the folks that put the rigs together. It was the communication group, Bob and Joe's communication team, and you name it, the media teams. There were so many familiar faces. They all worked ridiculously hard, but every time you saw somebody, they had a smile on their face. They were well overworked, but they were enjoying it. And aside from the athletes, because, we had so many more athletes with the teenagers here this year. Aside from the athletes, the folks that put it on certainly put in the effort and the work. And I think they had a good experience too. And thank you very much to all of them, because there were smiles and high fives and handshakes, and it was great to reconnect once again. You never take that for granted.
No, never. So venue, organization, schedule, and flow was stellar. And the things that we're talking about are minor improvements. Yeah, it could have been a little consolidated. Yeah, there was a lot more space than necessary, which is kind of awesome problem to have, but easy fix. And it was funny because we talked about on the final day, that final event, it actually would have been nice to have stands completely around that main floor.
Stadium feel to it.
Yeah, it was so packed for the final event. And Joe actually had told us yesterday on the phone that that was their intent. They really wanted to move the stands. Working with the venue has some pretty strict guidelines, and because that wasn't pre-planned months in advance, those stands weren't moving. And I was like, God, it totally makes sense. It was something that they thought about as well. But you had toured that facility, and Columbus was surprisingly great.
Yes.
one of my favorite days, you were right. I'd walk from the convention center. Well, we stayed at the Hyatt there at the convention center. So we walked from there to the running spot, which was almost a mile walk, where we started the run down by the river. And the run was super pleasant outdoors on that path. But that walk, down that main street, there's multiple stadiums.
Yep. Arena district.
All the arena district. It was super cool. I mean, on the way to the run, I was a nervous wreck. On the way back from the run, having done okay on the run, I felt it was a much more enjoyable walk back for sure. As far as the events, Rick, did you have a favorite event, and why was that a favorite event for you?
Well, I went in with playing mind games with myself. I feared, I don't know if fear is the right word. I had worries about every single one. And that's just maybe where I'm at, or mentally, the games that I play with myself, in my head. But there was one that was set up for Saturday night, the third event of the third day, and it had ring muscle ups in it. And normally that has been a go-to movement for me. Dealing with a little shoulder issue over the summer, I stayed away from your programming when you called for a lot of it. But going into that event, I sat on the outside of the cut line, needing to perform well in order to make up enough points to get into the final event on Sunday. And the shoulder was, a little painful, but I think adrenaline is incredible when it works in your favor. And, it was 5 rounds, 6 muscle ups, 6 ring muscle ups, 9 overhead squats at varying weights, men's and women's, into 12 box jump overs. And you had to move your box forward. So you got closer and closer to the fans in the stands as you were traversing through the workout. It was encouraging that the body did what I needed it to do. And you are such a tactician with all the execution that you have to have happen for things to go right. I kind of hold on by the seat of my pants a lot of times. And this is one where it just, the preparation and or the way the event played out, it allowed me to have some success. Not an event win, but score enough points that I could move on to Sunday. And I felt like I wasn't going to win the games. I wasn't even in podium position, but it was enough of a personal win that I was like, okay, I could still perform at a level I need to when my back is against the wall.
And you took 5th in that event. Is that correct?
I took 5th in that. Yeah. Took 5th in that event.
5th. And I remember waiting for that leaderboard to update for hours.
Yeah,
and
it
then
did not.
seeing you, it did not. And then seeing you in there, making the final event is a heck of an achievement. And it allows you to have the icing on the cake on that last day, I think.
Yes.
Really,
I went in with a lot less pressure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just let it all hang.
We could just go have a fun final event, right?
Right. I wasn't going to upset the leaderboard too much, and I wasn't within podium striking distance, but I wasn't going to stop. I'll tell you that much. And the only thing that was holding me back was my fitness or lack of. We'll see.
Well,
how about for you?
I loved the final event. I like you, I was nervous about every event. Mm-hmm. There wasn't any event where I felt like this is just going to be my event. In fact, I felt the ring muscle up event was going to be a good event for me, and it was good. I took 2nd, and I was slightly annoyed I didn't take 1st in that event. But the way that my point spread heading into that ring muscle up event, I had a large point lead, so I didn't need to sell my soul on that event. So I actually tapped the brakes a little bit. And in tapping the brakes, I let, my primary competitor, Kane Hayes, who's a tremendous athlete, I let him sneak in front of me to finish that event and take that event win. And it was just something about it. I kind of wanted that event win because I thought it was my event. I would have approached it differently if the circumstance was different. But my favorite event was the last event.
Bingo.
In practice, I thought this was going to be a really fun event. 2 rope climbs, 6 wall walks, 4 snatches, for a total of 4 rounds. And you're moving that barbell closer and closer to the finish line. So there's going to be this a lot of fun to it. And the night before the event, I was 11 spots in the lead. So I could give up 11 spots. And then it was announced that because the field of play was cut in half for the last event, each placement was worth double on that last event. So points were essentially doubled, if we want to think of it that way. So I went from, in my mind, an 11-person lead to a 5.5-person lead on an event that if you make mistakes on this event, you can get in big trouble. So I felt all confident the night before the event until I was only 5.5 placements ahead of Kane. And all of a sudden it was, this event's going to require significant precision. Or this is not a guaranteed win. 11 points, or not, I'm sorry, 11 points, 11 placements, we're going to be fine. But at 5, you just never know. And then I took a walk the morning of the final event, just kind of getting some blood in my legs. And I ran into a fellow competitor, great guy. And I asked him how the final event was. He was in an older age group that went well before us. And he's like, I was in first by 30 points. So I had a 44-point lead. He was in first by 30 points, had some mistakes in that event, and ended up taking second in the overall thing. Okay. And then I walk into the warm-up area. I run into Jen Dieter, who's a phenomenal athlete. She's on the Masters Chatter podcast. Give them a listen. She's great. She was ahead by 30 points as well, struggled in that last event and took third. And so now my brain is like
scrambled.
Oh my God. Okay. This event is legit. This is absolutely. But I had practiced this event and I have a very good shoulder stamina when it comes to wall walks. Rope climbs are fine. And then the snatches is also kind of a combination of that shoulder stamina, given that we're doing wall walks into this. So in practice, I had really pushed this event a week prior, thinking, okay, I just want to know what it felt like. So when I got to the third round, Rick, of snatches, and I was the first person to the barbell on those snatches, I felt home free. It felt great. The last round was just, a little bit of a victory lap. But even before all of that, I love an event where we pre-fatigue our shoulders and then do something like power snatches. Now, I don't love squat snatches pre-fatigued. Right. I feel like that's a little, it introduces some danger. But if we pre-fatigue our shoulders and then we've got to do some harder work, this is something we do in Boulder Athlete all the time. And so it was very familiar territory. I knew if I didn't make any glaring mistakes, this was going to be a big event. But before the event, I was very concerned that it could be a good event for everybody. That was the only concern I had, right? Most challenging event, physically and mentally, for you?
We'll start off with the 7K run. As simple as that sounds. Yeah. And we did a lot of running, and I certainly did a lot of running outside this summer, but running with intensity at a pace that maybe you're not as comfortable holding. A first event, you can't win the games in the first event, but you could put yourself in a pretty big hole. I think that's evident by a number of placements in some age groups. But first event, nerves, holding paces you're maybe not comfortable with. I think that just kind of, that was a big soup that was mixed up. And I was really encouraged when I turned that corner and saw that the finish line was in sight. And I knew I wasn't catching the person in front of me. And I looked back and it was you starting 5 minutes later than me. Coming up, I was like, okay, he's not my age group. I don't care. But you didn't get me. I was like, whatever, who cares? Cross the finish line, and then the legs went to hell after that. But I think that one got me. That was probably most challenging.
Were you sore the rest? Were you sore?
%. Yep. Never got the legs to feel right. And it really only the last few days have they felt right. So there you're talking about 5, 6, 7 days of residual soreness for me.
I agree. I was sore to the touch on day 2 and 3. And I think a lot of that was the intensity from the run. And then, the events on paper overall, which we'll talk about in a second, but what we thought the events were versus what they actually were, it turned out that there was a lot of legs. Of legs in this.
Yes.
My most challenging physically and mentally event was the AMRAP, 18-minute AMRAP. You've got 60 cal row, 50 kettlebell cleans, 40 toes to bar, 30 kettlebell thrusters, which were the easiest part, actually.
Absolutely.
No big deal.
100%.
Didn't even think of. I forgot I did them. And then 20 weighted pistol squats. And again, this is an AMRAP, so you go back to the rower after that. In testing, it was clear that this was going to be a hard workout. Regardless of the controversy around the standards on the kettlebell clean, I think when it's all said and done, the kettlebells have to go from a hang position to your elbows in front of the body. And however a kettlebell clean, and of course they have to touch your shoulders. It's fine. When it came down to it, I don't think we'll see those programmed again in the future, but I liked that it created some anxiety for all of us to try to figure out how to do these.
What is a clean?
Race.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Because we train kettlebell cleans, and a proper kettlebell clean has you catching in this front rack position, with the kettlebells on your forearms there. But in a race, that is not the fastest way to do it. And I mean, my shoulders were sore from hitting my shoulders with kettlebells, but that event stole your everything.
Soul.
Your soul. It was so hard. The first row is just a big deception. You could go as fast as you want, but it almost doesn't matter, because once you get to those kettlebell cleans, they're a punch in the face, and you have to move them forward. So you could literally see next to you really where each one of the athletes are. And that was great. So it's this tremendous race, and you get through the pistol squats, which are like this. Some people, they're like butter, and that's great. But most of us, the pistol squat with the weight is a high skill, very high skill, very high demand movement. And every single one of them felt like a new max effort.
Right. Yeah.
1, 2, I'm doing it. 3. Okay, I've got 3. I only have 17 more. Like every single one was imperative. Getting back to the row, there was almost nothing left in the tank for that row. And then for me, I got off that row and I glanced at the clock, and I've got well over 4 minutes to go, which means I'm going to get through all the cleans, and I'm going to be back on toe to bar, which is much, much faster than I did in practice. But it just meant that I have 4 minutes of grueling pain ahead of me. That's all I was thinking there. And I had a chance to catch up and maybe beat my primary competitor, but it was one of those events where I finished, I did 14 toes to bar. I clicked my 15th one after the time was done. And when I got to the ground, there was nothing. It was a full collapse to the ground. Not sure if I'm getting up anytime soon situation, right?
See, I need to go back because of the timing of our events. I did not watch yours in that. I was probably still trying to recover, and I forgot how far your age group went through. Our age group, I believe, got to the cleans, but certainly nobody got through the cleans.
Yeah.
A lot of us were on the rower the second time. And in full disclosure, I knew when I got to the rower, I wasn't going to get off. We just didn't have enough time. I was looking around saying to myself, I'm like, I didn't feel good physically at all. And I'm like, if I have to go pukey on this, am I going to go to the right or to the left? Because it was that rogue rower, which was double clamped into your feet. And I'm like, I can't get out of here quickly. I'm going to make a scene and a mess, because I really thought I was going to lose my stomach. It was ugly, but you guys much further through. It just shows the level of fitness.
It was not feeling good. Very true. Definitely didn't want to puke on that one, but had feelings of puking a couple times this weekend. But it was a huge amount of volume. Afterwards, that was our first event for that day. We had a big gap between our second event, but I'm pretty sure I finished that. I want to say that I went back to the hotel and slept, took a nap, physically exhausted. And then when you kind of wake up after dozing a little bit, and I think that night we did an event, my event time was 7:30 p.m. or something.
Yeah, really late.
Which is basically midnight. It's really fun. So to Masters athletes that are listening, we had some events that went, 7, 8 o'clock at night. That is going to destroy your sleep the next day. And it did. I couldn't sleep that night. Going into Saturday, which was day 3, I had 5% recovery, which is the lowest recovery I've ever had going into an event or a competition with 3 events that last day. So it took its toll, and I'm not complaining. I loved it, but that one was awful, mentally and physically. Period.
I went to Target between events to go do a little school shopping.
Of course you did.
But what it did is it got my mind off of what had gone through, and it was nice to be in a different environment.
Definitely.
Just walking along, drinking your recovered drink, and just chilling out. So it's recovery in a different way. But I'm thinking, man, I could have used a 3-hour nap, I think. But nope.
Any surprises in the programming for you?
Yes. Back to the pistols, back to the weighted pistols. I think pistols are fine. Just, look, there was no squatting in our semifinals. And I know that was an uproar in the community. A lot of people did semifinals that might be listening that remember hey, why didn't they have us go squat or below parallel? To do weighted pistols for masters up until a certain age, and then it was just pistols, I just think is a big ask.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to talk to them and find out, kind of the thought. Again, you should be able to do pistols. It is a one-legged squat. It's functional movement of, going below parallel, strength, stamina, the entire coordination.
Mm-hmm.
However, just that weighted component with masters athletes, I don't know.
Would you
we went from zero to a big thing with?
We did a big jump. I agree with you. I think the kettlebell, the choice of having kettlebells in competition was curious. I liked it. I actually liked it in competition. I thought it was fun. I can understand if we don't see that again because it posed a lot of challenges for some of the movement standards, but judging and movement standards. But so we did some pistol squats leading up to the games because we practice those. We've seen them at the games, so we need to have them in practice. But that's literally the only time around the year that we do more pistol squats. They'll show up, but not a ton. We just don't do a ton of that volume. And I think weighted actually puts us in a little bit better position typically. The counterbalance can keep our heels from coming off the ground and all of that. However, having not seen a weighted pistol, having never, ever in my life have I done a weighted pistol with a 44-pound kettlebell. Maybe the most is maybe a 15-pound plate, holding it out in front to counterbalance. But for me, a 44 for the 40 and under athletes, they had the 44 and under, they had the 53-pound kettlebell.
53-pound, yeah, for men.
It was so incredibly heavy. And I come at it from two angles. Like on one hand, it's a huge stretch. I completely agree with you. On the other hand, should we be doing more weighted pistols in training from a unilateral strength standpoint? But from a training perspective, my argument to that is we can always do step-ups. We can do lateral step-ups. We can do lots of single leg work that doesn't put quite the stress test that pistols do on a single joint.
Yes, that was it. It's that single joint issue I have an issue with.
Should we be able to, as human beings? Absolutely, we should be able to. But we are dealing with reality, and I would love to say, I think 60-plus-year-old athletes should be able to do ring muscle ups. They should be able to do your pistol squats. Can they? No. But we there's aspirations of what it would be great, and then the reality of hey, the 60-year-olds in CrossFit now at most have been doing it for 20 years, which means they started after 40. This is not a demographic that grew up doing this type of movement.
Correct. The counter to that argument, I think they could come back and say, look, folks, this is the games. You need to be ready for everything. It should be the hardest competition and just deal with it.
And those were, I would say, given all the movements, every movement has its own unique challenges. That was one of the toughest movements. It was one of the toughest single movements I've ever done at the CrossFit Games.
Okay. All right. Because outside of that, I think the programming was well balanced. I'm not listening to some of the internet hate that's coming out there. We tested long. Yes, there was an AMRAP, and AMRAPs punished first place, event winners, but we had a short sprint. We had a short-ish sprint. We had some medium time domains. There were some higher skill movements mixed in. There was plenty of barbells. I think it was well-rounded. We don't do the scorecard and check the box like Chase and Bill do, which is, I think, a good idea. They probably will break down the programming. Chase was there.
Yeah. I think it'd be good for them to do that.
Yeah, and see how balanced of a test it was. It really, I thought, was pretty complete. I just was kind of surprised at weighted pistols, and that's just an opinion.
I would say, even going back to some of our predictions and our thoughts, and Hiller even mentioned this in his video critique. I will say that Hiller he didn't thoroughly understand the workouts when he created his video critique of the workouts.
Correct.
And I appreciate some of his opinions, but again, he's making a big deal without again, take an extra hour to understand the workouts, or contact one of us. We're always available to talk through the workouts. Trust me, we studied this stuff. We knew them. We understood them clearly, but he definitely projected it to be a more heavy biased competition. And I would say after the entire experience, start to finish, all 8 events, I also felt it was fairly well balanced. It didn't feel like an overwhelmingly heavy CrossFit Games, even though on paper beforehand, it kind of looked that way. And I was a little bit nervous about that. I'm like, this just seems like a big guy competition. And I don't think after everything is said and done, I think Hiller gave it a 6.5 on a scale of, 5 would be most balanced. I think he gave it a 6.5 on the
towards
heavier
heavy
side.
Right.
I would probably bump that back to like a 5.5. That it was slightly heavy, but the deadlifts weren't heavy. The sled wasn't heavy. The kettlebells weren't heavy except for pistol squats. Right. The snatches on the last event weren't heavy. Moderate. Yeah.
Moderate.
Like, I think a clean and jerk is kind of a heavy thing, but we're going to see some sort of max lift in competition. We had the monostructural, and like you said, we had the short, medium, long. We've got the 18-minute AMRAP, which is longer than any event we did last year, plus the run, which is very long, plus very short events, which I hate. And I will say this, I think the most perfectly programmed workout out there was one that Hiller crapped on the most. He didn't understand, but it was 2 minutes of work, 1 minute of rest, times 4 rounds. With the goal of completing 300 double unders or as many double unders as possible within those time frames. You started with, in my age group, 16 handstand push-ups, 16 cal echo bike, and then the remaining 2 minutes, you've got double unders. And then you go 15, 15, then double unders, 14, 14, double unders, 13, 13. I tested it. I tested in the gym. It took me 4 rounds to complete all my double unders. I ran across the floor. I had to start across the floor every time. I tested it a second time in the gym, trying to hammer the bike more to see if I could get through this faster. Got to almost the exact same score as my first test. And then at the actual competition of the games, everything is on the line. All the adrenaline is there. I got almost the exact same score time-wise in finishing that event. But what was amazing about that is like, if it was 350 double unders, no one's finishing. If it was a couple more calories or handstand push-ups, no one's finishing. If it was it was a few less handstand push-ups and calories, too many people are finishing. So I think it's very hard to program a workout that hits a sweet spot like that, that's achievable, but barely by the very best. And I think they nailed it on that one. It was such a fitness test, similar to the Echo Bike workout last year, which was a straight up, can you do this work under duress? Because those were the hardest double unders I've ever done. I mean, by far. And it wasn't because of the handstand push-ups or the echo, but the combination of those two and the limited time frame and the repetitive nature, though 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, all of that just created pure annihilation by round 4. And it was perfect, in my opinion.
And I appreciate them using regular double unders, showing that there are many other ropes out there, great for training, sometimes for competition. But here it was just do a double under, but they are going to be very difficult. And had you put in drag ropes or weighted ropes or weighted handles, I mean, you would have had to reduce the number. It would have been sloppier, I think. People could pick up the rope. They didn't want to. Men and women, grab that rope and you started doing double unders. At least you knew what you had in front of you. Now, could you execute? But thank you for just doing double unders and not
simple.
Simple. It still meant it was ridiculously hard.
It was. Yeah. Maybe that goes in our category of surprises. Although in testing it was very hard, but in person, I got the same score as I did in testing, but it was twice as hard. There was something about the intensity of the moment, the adrenaline dump, the fact that it was day 3 and we were so beat up. I mean, we were fatigued, not beat up, but we were fatigued that, I remember getting to my last double unders. I think I had 51 or 49 left. I think 49. And I looked like I was trying to learn how to do double unders again for the very first time. I was high knees doing everything I could just to make them happen. Because
arms are out wide.
Everything was just exploding inside. Like that was definitely one of those where, and again, this was one of those workouts. It's really fun. I have footage in slow motion of me getting across the finish line, just keeled over in agony, looking up at my wife and kids like, I did it. I was excited. That was the turning point in the games for me. And then collapsing on my back on the floor. And there's a picture of me laying on my back and the whole field in the background is just men laying on their backs
laying
on
the ground.
It was great. So I'm reminiscing and that's really fun. And thank you for listening. But boy, was that a tough one. Really well done.
I did not finish, but I think we were still all on the floor when they called time. I mean, it was just.
And there weren't many that finished
in our
in any of the
I don't think we had one in our age group. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, but I don't think we did. Yeah, I did have some fun. A friend from Columbus was there with his daughter watching that event. He's the one who introduced me to CrossFit way back in the day. And I'm like jumping. I could see him in the crowd. I'm like thinking, why did you get me into this? You know, I got off the bike slower and slower each time, walked over to my rope, and I'm looking at him going, man, we could be playing golf right now or something else. For God's sakes, Rich, why'd you do that to me? So yeah, it was a good memory. I will have that memory. A lot of fun.
For the sake of time, Rick, I think what we should do, there's a couple of other things we want to talk about, but we'll do this in our next episode or in a future episode soon. I think it'd be fun to talk about the depth of the competition, you know, maybe some emerging names, some athletes who were quite impressive. I think we both have some stories of watching in our own divisions and in other divisions, some really interesting stories develop. We could talk a little bit more about some things behind the scenes that I think you and I experienced. So we'll share a bit more about that. I think before we close, it might be fun to speculate because while we were at the games, we did see that there was kind of a leak that CrossFit ended up embracing, which was really fun. They did a post about it, but the mayor of Albany, New York, had mentioned in a press conference that CrossFit was not going to be there next year, but they're headed to the West Coast. And he cat's out of the bag. I don't think he meant to, but he didn't realize how interested we are in this.
He doesn't realize how we listen. People are listening everywhere for clues and tips.
So what we do know is that the individual games will be in California in 2026 for the 20th anniversary of the CrossFit Games. Do you have any other speculation or did you hear anything else?
I am both ways on this. I think it makes sense to try for the 20th anniversary, pull everything together. Individuals, teams, age groups, meaning masters and teenagers. They've shown that they can do it before at venues that need not be named. We know who they all are out there, out west. However, I do know that the folks running our age group games had expressed a desire to find a place that they could be for a couple of years because the heavy lifting of site selection and the bidding process and the negotiations with hotels and the venue and restaurants and this and that. I mean, all that work went in. It takes away from pouring more energy and resources into the actual event itself. So to camp for a couple of years helps grow and refine your event. However, if HQ says, hey, it's the 20th anniversary, this is how we're doing it.
And that sounds like something HQ could do.
Absolutely. Yeah, that leads to field sizes because HQ, when they've had the age groups, have done 10-person fields for the Masters and 20-person fields for the Masters. Never larger, like we've experienced. The more competitors, 30th place is probably not threatening you on the top of the podium. However, brings in family, friends, support, energy, dollars, excitement. You made the games. There's a lot of pluses to having a larger field.
I agree. And one of the things that I was talking with someone out there, and they were talking about the fact that or maybe Dave may have done this on his Week in Review as well, because there were a couple of questions last week on his Week in Review about the festival nature of the games. When are we coming back to that? And he does selectively pick which questions he's going to answer. And so he chose those questions. He chose 4 or 5 people that had that question about, will that ever come back? And he said, conceivably, there could maybe be a time in the future. And so I think if they play that card, I think CrossFit HQ would run the indie side in California, wherever that might be. Wherever it is. I think they would still have the Legends team and the Pit team for the teenagers work these events specifically in conjunction or even at the same site where there could be some efficiencies in place. What Dave talked about was that, if you take the age group athletes and we are earlier in the week, and then you have the individual athletes later in the week, that requires them to book 2 weekends essentially out there.
Sure. Build
or set up.
Tear down.
So
absolutely.
If they do 2 weekends and they have us go first, we can have that huge field if let's say we compete Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Maybe our final event overlaps with the Indy first event, maybe one event that day. They've done that in the past. But CrossFit isn't obligated to run our event, but they can share equipment.
Good
so
point.
there's efficiencies there. There's efficiencies in the location.
The site. Yeah.
The site.
The booking.
There's, the vendor village. The vendor village, it's a lot of work for vendors to be there for the festival, which ends up being like 6 days for them. At the same time, if they have everybody that we had at the age group games this weekend on site there for their vendor village and including our vendor village, that whole thing is all together. That's thousands of people, including athletes and families, that will come and drop boatloads of money. In fact, there was one of our athletes brought like maybe 10 people with him from Canada, and they were all so excited to buy shoes at the games. And there was not a shoe vendor at our games.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he went over to Rogue and bought some shoes maybe, but if that's what we bring as masters athletes, or an age group athlete. So if there's, I don't know, 600-700 athletes plus their families going out to California, and we have our event and that flows into the games, we're going to stay there and buy tickets. A lot of us are, to watch the Indy games afterwards.
Sure.
So they're going to sell a lot more tickets that way. People that aren't willing to go to 2 different events will flock more to one event. If they're like, hey, we could go watch Grubb and Stevenson and the individuals, they got, Dallin and James, they can watch all of us. They're going to be more inclined to go to do this one thing. And it also, this is the last thing I'm going to say, if they do it, they'll likely do it on the time frame of the games, which tends to be early August, which is before people go back to school. And that tends to, again, bring a larger audience.
Correct. I remember that. It's always that week.
I'm with you in the fact that I don't necessarily want HQ to take this over. I want each team that runs each age group or adaptive division to run that and do it in unison. And because I think it helps keep that flow. Also, I know that they are going to vouch for the fact that they want a large field and they can support a large field. And God knows that $500 per person to pay to register for the games, that's a decent revenue stream when you have 500 athletes doing this.
Correct.
And if they bring back quarterfinals next year, there's another, we'll pay for they bring back quarterfinals, for goodness sakes.
Yeah,
just do it.
I know.
Anyway.
So, hey, you know what? It is the end of August and we have months to speculate because we never get information on time. We never get it when we want it. So we will speculate forever. And there's a lot going on this fall. And I know you and I have a lot to talk about.
Yep.
A lot of stories to profile and people to meet and talk to, events to talk and discuss. But we're going to speculate on this until we have an answer. And we might not have an answer for 5-6 months at this point.
But if you've made it this far, leave a comment.
Thank you.
Let us know what you think is happening next year. Let us know what you would want to see happen next year. I mean, our comment section is open to any and all comments, whatever you think. If you were an athlete at the games this year, fire away in the comments section. If there's things that you loved, things you hated. If there's anything that we could do, of course, to provide feedback back to the team at Legends or the team at CrossFit, we're happy to do that as well. I'm happy to provide as much feedback as I can as a member of the Athlete Council.
Yes.
So,
hey, it's thank you to the listeners that do listen to this, that came up and said, hey, keep it up, or I get a good entertainment, or it helps my drive. I heard a lot of that, and it's very appreciated. Very appreciated.
Very appreciated. All right, Rick, let's do this again next week.
You got it. We've got more to talk about.
Thanks for tuning in to the Masters in Motion podcast. We'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us reach more listeners and grow our Masters community. Until next time, get bolder, not older.